Imagine a man traveling through the wilderness. He comes across an ancient path and follows it. It leads him to an ancient city, which was inhabited by people of former times. In this ancient city, prosperity, balance, joy, delight, and wonder were as natural as the rivers below and skies above. Upon directly seeing this, the man then returns to his local city and explains his discovery to his local king. "You should know that while traveling, I saw an ancient path," said this man. "I followed it and found an ancient city. We are to rebuild our city and model it to this ancient city in order for our city to prosper. The king will then rebuild his city so that in due time it becomes stable, prosperous, rich, strong, and well populated. In the same way, I saw an ancient path," said the Buddha, "an ancient road traveled by the self-awakened ones of former times. And what is that ancient path? The Noble Eightfold Path." This is the method which the Buddha provided in order to enter the lost city, right? The lost psychological city where prosperity and joy and calmness and stillness, dwell, right? And from that as a basis, we are able to really be more creative and engage the world in a more meaningful and appropriate manner. And the Eightfold Path is the method which the Buddha presented in order for us to enter this lost city. Now, another really good analogy, apart from that simile that we presented in the beginning of this video, we have the analogy of the steering of the ship. The mind is like a ship in the ocean, right? It is powerful, right? It is strong. But if nobody is at the steering wheel, it becomes very dangerous, right? And what we end up doing is that we end up going around in circles, right? We are basically lost at sea because nobody is in the steering wheel and nobody is steering this ship of the mind towards a destination, right? There is no destination, right? So we're just essentially going around in circles in the middle of the ocean. So the winds that are basically, moving this ship, in circles around the ocean is the sort of winds of marketing, right? What we see in television, what we see in media, these sort of major brands that are so magnetic that they capture the imagination primarily of the younger generation, teenagers, right? Marketing is basically aimed at a particular age group, because they are the ones that are the most vulnerable, within their imaginations, right? And sort of these marketing brands, they're designed to sort of have, people, with a vulnerable mind, with a weak mind, have them go around in circles. And this is what we end up doing most of our life, right? Until eventually one gets towards a later age in life and one realizes that one has not really gone anywhere, that one has just spent most of our life going around in circles. And that is when, you discover a path, that is when one discovers, Buddhism or secular Buddhism or any other form of Buddhism, which teaches us, ways in which we can regain control of our mind, right? So this ship analogy is really good because it gives us this image of our mind being sort of this ship that no one is in control of. And what these meditations and what the Eightfold Path does is that it puts us back in control and it teaches us how to steer this ship and how to aim it and how to have a purpose and it gives us a destination. So we are no longer just simply going around in circles, but we are now on a sea journey. Now, each spoke of this wheel represents a particular theme that we have to put into practice in order to properly navigate this ship towards liberation, right? Or towards freedom, towards clarity, so that we are able to really cultivate and develop the life that we truly want to live. So there are 8 spokes in this wheel, and each one represents a theme. The first theme is right view, right? The second one is right intention. Now, these two fall under the category of the wisdom section of this teaching, and one is required to have the right view, right? We need to be introduced to these ideas and to understand the nature and how reality truly works, so that we have an appropriate view in which to see the world, right? And usually this requires a teacher to come in and kind of like show us, what is underneath the sort of surface level of reality, and that there is an alternate view, right? Rather than just consumerism and capitalism. So this sets our mind towards right view, and once we have the right view of the world, then that leads us into having right intent, and that leads us to planting the seed of having the intention to take control of our lives, so that we can steer it towards a path trajectory. Right. Now, then comes the next section of the Eightfold Path, which are the ethics, right? Right action, right? Right speech, right livelihood. Now, in action, speech, and livelihood, these are the ways that we act in the world, right? The way that we interact with one another, with each other, the way that we sort of make a living. So our actions are to be, kind and noble, right? And in the sort of Buddhist tradition, they are known as sort of the 5 precepts, which is, not harming, not stealing, not engaging in inappropriate sexual conduct, and essentially, taking part in actions that are sort of productive and not harming to oneself or to one another. Right speech, right? This is, not speaking divisively, right? Not sort of speaking in a manner that is harsh, right? Speaking gently, speaking kindly, right? Speaking words that inspire and lift, but also, that skillfully introduce that there is work to be done, right? Which is the, reality, which is the sort of, bitter truth that people don't want to hear. And that is one of the skills that, Buddhist philosophers have, is to be able to introduce these ideas in a way that they don't really have that aversive reaction, although that is something that we do have to overcome. So right speech is essential in sort of steering our life towards a more sort of productive and meaningful and purposeful direction. Now, the third theme of the ethics section is livelihood. We all have to make a living, right? And there are good ways of making a living, and there's wrong ways, right? There's right ways of making a living, and there are wrong ways of making a living. An obvious example is, let's say, you don't want to be an ivory dealer, right? You don't want to kill elephants in Africa so that you can sell their ivory in the black market, right? That is obviously an unethical way of making a living, right? There are other examples of ways that are wrong ways of making a living, right? A really good example is there was this movie, a really popular movie by Leonardo DiCaprio called The Wolf of Wall Street, which was essentially this group of stockbrokers who made millions of dollars selling fake stocks. Right? They were obviously lying, deceiving, and sort of manipulating people, right? And in that movie they were engaging in drugs. So that is a perfect example of the wrong, unethical way of living a life. Although people kind of love that kind of entertainment, right? Same way as like a Scarface, right? People love these kinds of movies, right? But they depict the sort of not a right way of making a living. You don't want to be a drug dealer, right? You don't want to sell fake stocks, right? And you don't want to kill elephants in Africa to sell their ivory. So finding a right way of making a living, right? So that's the right livelihood. Now we arrive to the third section of the Eightfold Path, which are the sort of meditation, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Now, these are ways and practices that we use to cultivate our mind, to develop our mind, right? What's interesting about us as human beings is that we're not plants, right? Plants can just sort of sit there and receive sunlight without any effort, really, right? They don't require physical effort or mental effort, if they have a brain. I don't know. But the idea is that they just sit there and they don't have to do anything. We human beings, we require effort, right? We have to have, if we are required to put in physical effort and mental effort. So in the meditation sections, we are to put in mental effort. We have to diligently, engage these sort of activities that we know are right for our minds, that are going to develop our minds and grow our minds towards a more sort of appropriate direction in life. So effort is very important. Now that effort is applied in the mindfulness, having right mindfulness, which in the Satipatthana Sutta, which is a discourse by the Buddha, which we will cover in the next module, very clearly and technically presents what we are to be mindful of, our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And mindfulness is the overall theme of this course, and we are beginning to see that mindfulness underpins the entirety of, the path and, living itself. We always have to be mindful as to what we're doing, what we're thinking, and where we are going. So right mindfulness is important. And in the Satipatthana Sutta discourse, it goes into very much detail as to how to go about that. And that will be the central focus of the next module. Now, right concentration, right? That also is a part of the sort of meditation, knowing what to concentrate in that will help us, grow and develop our mind. So in a more practical sense is like, what kind of activities do we want to engage in, right? What environment, what kind of people do we want to be around with that are healthy for us? So some examples is yoga class, meditation class, or maybe an online course, or maybe going on a weekend retreat. These are activities that and environments that are productive for the development of our mind. And this is what we want to be engaged in and concentrated on, right? We want to have the right form of concentration that leads us to be more productive. Now, within our culture, everything within our culture, social media, television, is designed to steal our concentration and to sort of refocus our concentrating abilities into something that doesn't really help us grow, but actually leads us towards a more degenerate way of living, right? I'm pretty sure most of you are kind of like fed up with like social media in general. It's just a bunch of like nonsense that is not really productive, right? And Facebook is declining, right? It is losing subscribers because people are beginning to realize that it's just there's a lot of like fake sort of content out there, right? So what we want to do is we want to be concentrated in the right things, right? In the appropriate things. We want to have appropriate concentration. The purpose of this section is to just introduce the Eightfold Path that we just very generally sketched here. And this is a theme, in general that can be revisited over and over and over, right? It's not linear. It's not something that you go step by step, but rather you keep, you visit once and then you visit again and again and again, and each time you go in deeper and acquire deeper realizations. There are courses out there that are dedicated exclusively just to this because it is a very deep and rich topic, right? Scholar, I highly recommend these two options. Option number one is in this website, Sydney Insight Meditators, there is a retreat that Stephen Batchelor gave in Sydney. It's called Secular Dharma and Ethical Living. How to engage in a world in crisis. So these are the recordings. And in this retreat, Stephen Batchelor right here, he basically goes through his presentation of the reimagining of the Eightfold Path, right? So what I recommend, which is what I did, and usually what I always do, is I go directly to his presentations. In this retreat, he did it with two other people. So Stephen Batchelor usually, he gave the morning session, and then I think she did the midday session, and he did the afternoon sessions. So far, I've only gone through his morning sessions. So in his first sort of, the first night, the arrival night of that retreat, he gave the presentation on mindfulness and collectiveness, which are the first two themes of the Eightfold Path, which he is presenting differently, right? So here's the themes. And then here he gave it on a perspective. And then you can just keep scrolling down. And then here he is on imagination. And then application. And here's an interesting guided meditation, which I highly recommend. And then survival. You could listen to these videos as podcasts, or you can just watch the videos. I recommend just listening as a podcast, so that your imagination is really able to process it, right? And then kind of like, and it helps with the imagination, right? Although it's often, sometimes it's good to sort of watch the image so that you could get a sense of humanity. Although it's still, this is a digital presentation, right? And then here is his on the theme of work, right? And then the last is on voice, right? So each one of these is like an hour. So this is like, just by listening and watching his presentations, that's a good, I think, like 6 to 10 hours of, you know, a presentation on these themes by a master, right? He's been studying these ideas for, I think, way like over 50 years. So this is what I recommend: is listen to these talks. Now, a second option is he also has a sort of more of a produced course, an online course in a tricycle website, and here he calls it Reimagining the Eightfold Path. Now, one thing I notice about him is that he's always presenting it as a within a group, right? He doesn't give these talks by himself. He's always along with his sangha, his community, right? Which I really like, right? Now, me personally, I'm interested in just his ideas. Like, I only want to hear him talk. But, it's about community, and he's presenting, his friends and colleagues along with him, and I think that's wonderful. And this is his wife right there, right? Martine Batchelor. So this is option number 2. Now, this is an official online course. It's $170, and what you're paying for here is the production value, right? That's always what you're paying for, is the production value of any thing, because these ideas you can get in a book, or you can get them literally for free, right? It's just that people need something visual in order to capture their attention. So, and that production that goes into these presentations, is work, and it deserves a fee. So this is what I recommend as a sort of second option, is this course, right? And it's study in your own pace, and he goes well in depth. I haven't taken this course. I've taken his other course, but I think this is the one that I'm going to take next, because I've been studying and reviewing his free stuff. But you wanna support the scholar and the author, right? So this is option number 2. I highly recommend all of his work, but in particular, like, these 2. So you can take this one for $170, or you can take this one for free, right? Or you can take both. I recommend both, right? The more, the merrier. So these are just some options that are available on the market. So now it's important to touch upon this idea of discernment. Within the Eightfold Path, you have right view, right intent, right action, which implies that there is a wrong way of doing it, right? And the way that it is traditionally presented, the Buddhist tradition of Buddhism comes in and says, this is the right way of doing it, and if you don't do it our way, then you're doing it wrong, right? That is not the secular Buddhist approach, right? It is up to each one of us to really discern for ourselves, and to have the skill to discern appropriately, right? Each one of us should be able to determine what is the appropriate action, what is the appropriate way of us acting in the world, and what is the sort of appropriate way of us sort of engaging with one another, right? We are more than well capable of coming to those discernment decisions, right? And so from a secular Buddhist perspective, which is the framework in which this course is presented, it is up to each one of you to discern what is the appropriate view, what is the appropriate intent, right? So it doesn't come down from some institution or some authority, right? It comes from within us, right? And as we develop and mature, we come to a sort of more refined way of what those actions may be. So having the ability to discern is very important. Now, a very important distinction between the traditional way that the Eightfold Path is presented and the more modern secular presentation that we're giving here is that in the traditional path, the Eightfold Path is presented as the path that leads to the end of suffering, right? To the end of dukkha, to the end of the cycle of birth and rebirth, right? Um, that is not the secular Buddhist perspective, right? In the secular Buddhist model, we are reimagining and reinterpreting it very differently, right? It is not an escape plan, it is a restoration. We are restoring the lost city, right? The city where prosperity, beauty, creativity, virtue, skills, prospered, abundantly, right? Uh, this is the city that we are trying to restore and rebuild. So, a clear distinction between the traditional path and the secular path is that it is a restoration project, not an escape plan. It is now time to bring this unit to a closing. Um, in this unit, we cover the Eightfold Path within the context of the entire course, which the theme is mindfulness. And the idea of the entire course is to bring mindfulness into these different areas, these different philosophies, these different ideas, so that we can become aware of them, not only of their existence in the world, but also of their benefit and their great impact that is having, very subtly within our culture. And by us, spreading mindfulness, we bring more awareness to the world that these technologies do exist. Um, so in this unit, we cover the Eightfold Path, which is, as we previously mentioned, the path that the Buddha presented in order for us to achieve this great city, which we use as an analogy. Um, you know, which is the inner city, right? Our psychological mind state where we are able to be prosperous, creative, find wonder, and find our voice once again, right? And the Eightfold Path is what leads us to this inner lost city. And upon, you know, uh, coming into contact with any great idea or any great sort of a place, the next thing that we do is we share them with others. And that is the attempt within the overall presentation of this entire course. And within this particular unit, is to bring mindful awareness to these 8 steps that lead to this inner world, to this inner lost city that we can not conquer, but sort of be initiated into, or to use more of a Eastern term, that we can awaken into. So hopefully this unit was of benefit and interest. And as always, it is these ideas are ideas that you keep circulating, you keep circumambulating, you just keep revisiting them over and over and over, and each time you go in deeper and deeper and deeper, not only at an intellectual level but also at an intuitive level. So good luck on the journey.